couple of seconds for the internet to catch up to all the streaming sites, and we are live. Good evening, good morning, wherever you're tuning in from. Welcome to episode 10 of the Level Up Your Wealth podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Marcus Howard. And as you can see at the bottom, if you click on this link, this podcast is proudly sponsored by the gamers at Tomes Financial. Click on that link, bit.ly/levelupyourwealth, to see all of the old episodes, the last 10 episodes, some free ebooks or some no-cost ebooks from Mario, and you can even actually book a no-cost consultation with him. And Mario, if you don't mind, please introduce yourself, and definitely excited to talk to Don afterwards.
Yeah, so Mario Payne in beautiful Jacksonville, Florida. We was not hurt too much by the hurricane, and anybody that was affected, we'll keep you guys in our prayers. Just happy to be here, happy to be alive, happy to share information. Still on cloud 9 for my book released 2 weeks ago. I'm a bestseller now, so amazing. So just happy about that, and happy for everybody for the support. Just happy to hear it, and we get to talk to a Emmy Award winner.
And an author. He's an author too.
And an author.
With the author club. Welcome to the show, Don. For those who aren't familiar with you, if you don't mind, just a quick intro, bring everybody up to speed. We're excited to chat with you tonight.
Sure, and thanks for having me here. I'm a video game designer and a writer, and I'm one of those kids who 52 years ago started falling into creating computer and then video games. And I've spent my entire adult life and entire career pretty much writing games and producing games and working in the industry.
Let's start with the Emmy, right? There's a lot to talk about here, but we got to start with the Emmy. Let us know a little about that. Congratulations, first and foremost. And anybody who has questions for Don or Mario, please send them in the chat. But please, yes, let us know about the Emmy.
Well, and thank you. The Emmy, I was able to receive it on behalf of the team that created the original version of a game called Neverwinter Nights. And in 1989, the old online multiplayer RPG games of that time were called MUDs. They were text-based games, and stories were told in text. And we didn't have graphical games like World of Warcraft or EverQuest. And so we were working on projects with AOL, and we were also working on doing RPG games with SSI, which had a series called the Gold Box games, which are the most popular Dungeons and Dragons game of that era in the late 80s, early 90s. And I woke up one morning and thought, oh, wait a second. We're doing online games with AOL, and we're doing graphical role-playing games with SSI. We know both engines. If we put the engines together and do A, B, and C, we can be the first ones to break through and have a graphical massively multiplayer role-playing game. And so I had to sell it to AOL, to SSI, to the TSR that owned Dungeons and Dragons. And fortunately, they all went along with the deal. And 2 years later, actually a year and a half later, we went live, and the game was a great success and ran for 7 years. So.
That's awesome. Congratulations. And shout out to Adam Starcaster joining us, and Vince. Thank you for joining us. And everyone else who's joining us live, let us know where you're tuning in from. AOL, that's old school.
That tone, that sound of the connecting modem. And in fact, back when I started working with them, there was one point where we were the only outside game developers working with them. They had about 40 or 45 people when they started.
Wow. Now, I have to ask a question, all right? So I was able to play a game with my friend who won a Grammy, but I have not been able to play a game with a person that won an Emmy. So we could play some rock, scissors, paper if you want to play a game of rock, scissors, paper. So I'm halfway to an EGOT, right? I got the Emmy, the Grammy, and the Oscar, and Tony. So so you want to play rock, scissors, paper with me?
Sure. And you're going to have, you may want to break this down actually into subcategories, because what I have is called a technical and engineering Emmy.
Okay.
And then the primetime Emmys are a completely different category. Engineering and daytime are run out of New York, and primetime are run out of Los Angeles. So if you really want the complete set, you're going to need one of each kind of Emmy.
Oh, life goals. Life goals.
It's going to be one of those, quite the acronym when you get done with it.
I know, right? All right, so here we go. Rock, scissors, paper. So very easy to play, right? But you can't look at my screen, Don. You gotta look at your other screen.
Okay, let me get fully separated over here, so I
Okay.
cannot even see your screen except for glancing over to cheat.
Now, anybody who is tuning in live, let us know in the chat if you think Mario's going to win or Don, and whoever we're going to pick a winner from whoever puts the bet in, and they'll win a digital copy of my book, and a digital copy of Mario's book. So get your bets in. You got 10 seconds. Put your bets in real quick, and we'll get this kicked off. Now,
My
Don,
grandkids are betting on Mario.
Mario, I think his record is 3-2. So you got a strong shot here.
Hey, if we was playing baseball, I'd be in the Hall of Fame, right? Man, 600%. All right, so we'll go. So I picked my first one.
Okay.
Oh, draw. All right, so this is the best out of 10 too. So the first one to 10 wins.
Whoops.
Oh, okay, Don for the win. Okay.
If anybody else wants to take a look at this game, it's rps.gg. Shout out to our buddy Eugene over in Europe who put this together. It's an amazing game. He'll be a future guest on the show. You can't vote for both, Terry. That's clever. You can't. He's trying to rig the game here. That's clever. You got to get one vote in.
So Don. So as we're playing, tell us how frustrating it was to basically create games and game on AOL.
You know, it's funny because at the time, because it was so unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it was frustrating, but it didn't. It didn't. Sorry, I'm thinking about rock paper scissors instead of
I'm trying to confuse you. You're like 4 straight. So actually, you know what? Let's not even ask questions because you're killing me right now.
So, but because it was so revolutionary, we weren't thinking about the limitations. We were thinking about what was possible was new. So that's what we were focused on.
Okay. I need to focus on rock, scissors, paper because you're 8-6 on me right now. So the reason why we do this is because I invest clients' money for a living. I have my own investment firm, and like the trends of what you pick doing rock, paper, scissors actually says a lot what you are from an investment standpoint. But then also investing, we look at trends, right? Oh, 8-8. Oh, 2 out of 3. Yeah. So we look at the match point.
Oh, you pulled it out. Oh, you pulled it out.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
So we've got a couple votes in here for Mario. Let's see. Rachel, I think. Rachel, you did win. Congratulations. You win a digital copy of Mario's book and my book. We'll get that to you after the show. Congratulations to everybody for voting. Appreciate you participating. More chances through as the seasons go on with the show.
I guess so. Illy and Chris, y'all didn't believe in me. Eric, you didn't believe in me. Rachel, huh? You didn't believe in me.
I'm sorry I let him down.
But now, so as I was saying, like, so again, me managing money for a living. Basically, we look at trends as investing, right? So if the market's going up, as investors, we trend to kind of get into the market. Where typically the market's trending up, that might be the best time to kind of get out the market, right? The thought process is
buy on the dip.
Yeah, there you go, right? So y'all should have bought when I was losing 4 straight. That was the dip. And then you would have doubled your money. Yeah, Rachel, I got you. See, she has the ED behind her. See, you're smart, Rachel. You're smart. So again, let's kind of go over like the innovation. So I mean, could you imagine when you helped create games then in the 90s, the 2000s that it would be so easy today to do games? And did you just think from an innovation standpoint, games would be like they are today when you first started creating games?
In each of the eras, I've had different opinions, and most of them have been wrong. In the 1970s, I was writing games on mainframes. There was no games industry. Those machines cost several $1 million each. I was a college student, a grad student, a teacher, and we just wrote games for fun. We wrote games for each other.
Okay.
And then some of the games started to be traded around the country, and I didn't even realize that was being done until I got my first fan letter in 1972.
Mm.
And realized, wow, somebody other than somebody in our college is actually playing one of my games.
Mm.
And so I didn't picture a gigantic games industry or anything else. We were just doing it for fun. And then when the industry started, very early on, I was very lucky, had the chance to get in at the very start and become one of the original 5 programmers for Intellivision, excuse me, at Mattel. And it was kind of like, okay, no, this isn't real. This is a movie. 2 years ago, I was a school teacher. I was working 3 jobs. We had a new baby. We had a mortgage, all that. And then 2 years later, I was working on this team and ended up being director of game design. And it just felt like, the fantastical movie. And I kept going, okay, I don't want to wake up from this dream. You don't want to reach the end of the movie and go back to real life. So then the industry crashes in 1983, obviously one of our topics tonight.
Right.
And, I had started to think, hey, this is really going to go on and grow and become something big. And then a lot of people said, oh, video games were just a fad. They're nothing special. They thought they were important. No, real toys, real entertainment. That's where it's at. These guys, they're discarded onto the dustbin of history. And which is kind of depressing. And I got recruited to work at Electronic Arts, again, very lucky at the very beginning. And the computer game, as console games were really in the garbage, but computer games with which we were doing were growing, and EA started to grow. And at that point, it started to look like, okay, this could be a business. Just being a business felt good. And then in the early 90s, the industry really came roaring back, especially thanks to Nintendo, which took a lot of risks to bring us back. And the company started going public, and suddenly we were a big industry. We were big business, and all the companies started to act like it. Because as you guys know better than anyone, once you are a public company, you are driven by different forces than when you are private. Your quarterly results, your annual results, your projections all have dramatic effects, not only on your stock price, but on the lives of your investors. And for some of your investors who may have their savings for retirement in there, you can have a big impact. So the business becomes looked at a completely different way. That happened in the 90s. At that point, I think people started to think, okay, it's just going to be steady growth. It's simple. Consoles are dominating PC. And of course, we've had surprises like the comeback of PC, the growth of online, the way the internet grew, the appearance of mobile, which is now the biggest games category of all, even though it is derided by some game developers. So we keep having these surprises. I think the one thing, if you get a bunch of longtime game developers in a room and they talk about trends or things like this, the one thing they will all say is, to last in this industry, you have to keep reinventing yourself, because we don't know what's coming 5 years from now, but we better be willing to change and learn to adapt to whatever that is.
And circle back on that, we talk about stocks. So you said EA. So like I gotta share my screen, right? From an investment standpoint, if a person invested in EA, and we're gonna say, not even when it went public, but in 2005, right? So it had a dip, but you kind of see from 2005 to now, the year 2023, that's 121% return on the money. So definitely, somebody knew what they was doing with EA, because EA has definitely grown. A person invested in 2005, they doubled their money, which is always good. So when you was at EA, like the growth of Madden, I mean, I am a Madden fan. I used to wait in those lines when Madden was, not downloadable. You kids, you got it good today. You don't got to wait in lines at nighttime. You don't got to do that no more. You just download and wait for 2 hours. So did you know that the EA as a company would grow as much as it has?
Well, I joined in late 1983, so well before the company went public.
Okay. Okay.
So the original Madden football, which was not successful when it shipped because the technology was really not ready for it. was under development at that point. I did Earl Weaver baseball and World Tour golf there. The company also did Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one. So we were doing sports games very early on. I think the real breakout of EA came in for sports. We trace back to Madden. It's exactly as you said, because two guys who are the ones who drove what we know as modern Madden were Scott Orr and Rich Hillman. And they teamed up. Scott was the lead designer and Rich is producer, but they really operated as a team. And they produced what we know as Madden now, today, was created by those two guys. Again, as part of bigger teams, but they were the ones who led and drove it. And so whenever you talk Madden, we have to talk about Trip Hawkins for making the deal, seeing what Madden could be. And we have to talk about Scott Orr and Rich Hillman for then, when the technology caught up, creating that. The marketing team at EA in the mid-90s saw what this was doing and executed what I think was an absolutely brilliant campaign to create EA Sports and make it a brand, not just a series of projects.
Yeah. And David, so the European model has been going strong for 2+ decades. Maybe that's a model studied to get better. Talking about rocks as a paper? Get better. And to your point, like, you know, it's all about community. So I know basically you coined the phrase game industry crash. So like, tell me kind of where that came from, what was your thought process? And then like, did you have individuals in the gaming industry that was mad at you? Did you get hate mail? You know, because you basically, by sending us a crash, you know, people could have lost their jobs if people thought that, you know, gaming that was growing at that time was going to go away. So like, how was that process when you coined the phrase, and did you get love from people, hate, a little bit of both?
Actually, the way it worked out, first I had to live through the crash, because the crash, the roots of it were set up in 82, and we're going to talk more about that. But 83 is when it really all happened. And then the last bit of 84, the whole industry fell apart. So all of us who were working, for all intents and purposes, all of us who were working in what today we would call console games, all those jobs went away, thousands of jobs. And what was left, the estimates I've read is that 97% of the revenue in the business went away. And that feels bad compared to what we went through.
Whoa.
Because we went from being over 3 billion a year to being maybe 100 million. The biggest company in the industry if I'm remembering this correctly, in 1984 had annual revenues of $40 billion. And that would have been Broderman. So that was the crash. I talked about that term internally when I was leading the Intellivision game development for Mattel. After I was programmer, I was promoted to manager and then director. And I talked to the team about that as it started to happen. I said, it can feel like a crash. All we can do is try to focus on building great games. And of course, it turned out everything went. But the root for that is my parents got married during the Depression in the early mid-1930s. And so I was being raised by Depression kids. The idea of talking about the crash, we talked a lot about the crash of 1929, if you can believe it, as I was growing up, because that derailed both my parents' careers. And so it was natural for me to take, the crash of 29, this is my craft. This is my chosen work. This is what I felt like I was meant to do. Right. And I was so lucky to get in at the beginning, and suddenly all the jobs go away. So to me, that was like the crash of 29. So that's where me saying it's the crash came from. And the first place it's in print is, I think, a 1987 or 1988 article in Computer Gaming World. But I'd been talking about it internally before that. So I didn't get love or hate. It was just everybody knew what had happened. It just turned out the term I used for it was the one people picked up on.
Sorry, one more question. Let's just kind of dive a little deeper than that. So what's the economics behind that? So literally you have an industry that loses 97%. I mean, think about an industry today losing 97% of its value. Like, it would be ruined, right? So like, what's the economics behind that? So like, what did people do? Like developers and things of that nature? Did they just start other jobs? Like, so how did the industry kind of go from there to kind of where it is today? Like, how did that happen economically?
So here's the key fact to understand how this happened. Now I can't just go out. If I want to do a lousy, quick, cheap game, I can't put that game on PlayStation. Sony won't let me. Nintendo on Switch won't let me. Microsoft on any Xbox product won't let me. But in the early 80s, people have been developing these systems, hadn't thought about that, or they thought they had protections against it. It turns out they didn't. And so as Atari became successful, then we became successful. And shortly before the crash, ColecoVision became successful and became large companies. People started reverse engineering each other's boxes and making games for other people's systems. Outside companies started doing the same thing. And because video games was such a hot industry, I mean, if you think about 3.5 billion in 1982 or 83 would be probably, I'd have to look at it, probably comparable, but almost $20 billion now in today's dollars. And so everybody was trying to get into video games. So I kid you, this is not joking. The Quaker Oats Company, cereal makers, opened a video games division to try to cash in on this. Because this was the area when conglomerates who went into many industries, that was a way to do things if you were a publicly traded company. And of course, all these companies come in, they're trying to throw together teams. They're hiring people back and forth from each other's teams. We were all getting recruited almost every day. We'd hear the phones in our studio ringing one by one down the cubicle because somebody had the phone list for the office. And it'd be recruiters saying, come work here, come work there.
Yeah.
You know, come, you'll be the head of this, you'll make millions. And so what that produced was a lot of new games all at once, many of which were done in a hurry by people who were just starting to learn how to use the machines. We were in-house, we had all the documentation for our system, but so we could do things other people couldn't do. And the retailers were making so much money, they took all of it. So now suddenly we've made 2 years worth of product in 1 year. We have oversupply. It goes to retail. We've stuffed the channel, which you know is very dangerous. It always produces returns and challenges, as they say.
Yeah.
And so what happens, of course, a lot of these games don't sell. A typical game at that price, price in those days is about $34.95. That's around $100 now. That's how special the new idea of games were. Both the Atari unit and our unit were just below or above $1,000 in price to buy just the console in today's dollars. But because we were the first units like that, it was exciting. A unit that preceded us, it's very important to talk about. I know I'm going a little bit afield here, but is the Fairchild Model F. Fairchild Model F was the first game system that used cartridges. It wasn't just games programmed into it. You could just have one game like Pong. And it's produced Fairchild Semiconductor. The leader of the team that designed and produced the Fairchild Model F was Jerry Lawson, who was one of the leading African-American engineers in the history of Silicon Valley. And Jerry Lawson set up the circumstances that made all of the rest of our careers possible by inventing the cartridge system. He doesn't get anywhere near the credit and recognition he should. His papers are, I'm honored, my papers are at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, and they also have his materials from his family. And I'll tell you, I'm honored to have my materials in the same institution. But so with all these companies having done this, the channel overstuffed, nothing would sell at $34.95. You're not going to spend $100 on all this stuff that everybody says is terrible. Well, the video game business grew out of the toy business. Mattel Toys was a toy company. They made Barbie and Hot Wheels as well as in television. In fact, in 1983, our studio was in an old Hot Wheels factory with a corrugated tin roof. Southern California heat in the summer made that very interesting.
Yeah.
The machines our development systems kept going down because they would overheat because somebody hadn't planned ahead on where they were going to put us. But okay, if it doesn't sell $34.95, what does the toy industry do that we grew out of? If toys don't sell, the companies take them back. It is a consignment industry. So if a toy doesn't sell, the toy company takes it back. It gives the store credit. The store uses the credit to buy something else that does sell. Everybody's happy. They go on. Well, all these fly-by-night companies, when their games didn't sell and the retailers went to return them, it was like, I'm sorry, I can't take returns. We spent all the money. We can't refund your money, and we don't have new products yet to swap out to you. We can't do anything. They went bankrupt, and now the stores are left with this inventory and no one to return it to.
Mm.
So is that how we end up with landfills of ET and other cartridges?
ET is a symptom of the problem. People think that ET was the problem. No,
right.
ET was a symptom of the problem. So what happens is they bring out the bargain boxes and the bins. $29.95. Oh, it didn't sell. $24.95. Didn't sell. $19.95. $14.95. $9.95. $4.99.
Wow.
And so it turned out that $5 and $10, $4.99, $9.99 were the two price points. The better stuff could sell for 10, and the wacky stuff would sell for 5.
Wow.
And in fact, some good games end up selling for 5. At that point, nobody could make any money. The retailers were not ordering anything new, and pretty much the whole business melted. Another thing that happens is in the toy business, they know a rule that I was taught by some great toy industry people. And that is, if a toy is a fad and it starts to fade, if you're a store, get out of it when it starts to fade, because otherwise you will end up with inventory you cannot do anything with. And so they stopped ordering completely. Even our very best games, our consoles, they would not order.
So just to kind of piggyback on that. So that's a bubble. So right now, today, of course, we have like the quote unquote AI bubble, right? So you think it's any parallels to the gaming bubble and burst compared to AI? Like right now, every company is integrating AI, ChatGPT. Everybody wants a prompt manager and a prompt engineer. He or she kind of helps create their AI. Like it's going to be this crazy thing that takes over the world. I think it's going to be a crazy thing, maybe not take over the world. So what parallels do you see with like AI today compared to the gaming industry back before it crashed?
Let me just type in your question. I can get a good answer. Oh, no, I should answer. I agree with you. I think the long-term potential is very high. I think the complexities that call for regulation and the growth of law around it also are very real. I think there's ethical issues, the whole 9 yards. But I think it's powerful. I don't think it's going away. I think it is a big deal. In that context, whenever this happens, you have things that are fads or bubbles. They hit their peak, they start to go down, and then they find a plateau. That plateau is the long-term value of the business once all the magic pixie dust and the initial joy wear off. That plateau can be relatively high. If you look at some industries, they don't have a big fall off, and they go through. They continue to grow from there. Others can just disappear. We look like we are disappearing, and we look like we were fatally poisoned, because the toy industry, the toy stores, all of our retail channels believe that they should no longer buy us. That should have been a death sentence. Only computer games and later Nintendo solved it. If you look at the online bubble bursting in 2000, obviously the internet is not a bad business today, but boy, that was an ugly, ugly drop. Yeah. So I think that happens. And the question is, what is the plateau on the other side? So whenever something is red hot, my dad, who I mentioned, lived through the Depression, and his dad, who was a survivor of the Alaskan gold rush of 1899, my dad always used to say, trees don't grow to the sky. Whenever something seems, they don't touch the sky. Whenever anything seems too big, too good to be true, it's, the pendulum will swing back the other way. Things balance. So So I think that's the question. And as we're looking at AI right now, I think there is a very solid, and I'm a layperson. I'm not an analyst in this, and I don't pretend to have special knowledge. I'm just a guy who's lived through pretty much the whole history of Silicon Valley. So I've seen a lot of stuff. In that context, I think there's a very real plateau in AI, but I think it's not just a matter of surviving the bubble and then finding the plateau. I think it's a matter of, this is something that's going to change society, and we have to decide what changes will support, where we want to try and put rails on the experience, what we don't want to have happen. And government and business need to work together to do that, I think.
Yeah, and so from a stock standpoint, right? So one, I'll share my screen again. One very that I actually got to meet her actually on Saturday, which was crazy. Sunday, it was crazy. It was Kathy Wood, and she actually has the ARC Innovation ETF. And the ARC Innovation ETF, to your point, invests in like a lot of startups tied to AI, and like it went up. And then, of course, it went up by 738%. And then, literally, when the quote unquote, not bubble, but when the market dropped last year, it went down by almost 80%. So, like a person that bought it.
That looks like the video game industry from 1980 to 84.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. A lot of those AI companies or those companies that are trying to create AI, as time goes on, we have that run up again. We do have the run up. It's going to be a lot of happy people who invest now. If not, then it's going to be a lot of upset people that bought this fund in 2020 and 2021 because they're hurting right now. So it's interesting that you say that it's going to go down and plateau, and then kind of what happens from there.
And we don't know. You guys could teach me about how long the dips are likely to last. I've seen them be fast, and I've seen them be very slow. But you guys probably have a lot better tools to analyze those questions.
Yeah. Don, I have a question for you. We talked about this before. Do you see any parallels between what happened in 1983, or I guess 82 to 85, and what's happening in esports? And we've seen a publicly traded company, FaZe Clan, whose stock price has dropped 97%. A lot of the things you described, I've experienced and seen and heard from my colleagues of people being kind of poached from one company to the next. Companies just spinning up esports just because it's trending, right? The not delivering on the quality, the standard of quality that you would expect, and so now you have brands and commercial side of it kind of drawing back. Do you see those parallels as well? And anybody who's watching and viewing this, let us know in the chat if you've seen any of this. Go ahead, Don.
I see a lot of parallels. I think another parallel was you had investors who were fairly passive, in effect, getting on the phone and saying, "Oh, Reggie, I hear that this esports thing is quite big. Will you invest in that?" Yes, do that for me. That's not research. That's not investing. That's just throwing money around. And I think we saw some of that too. So I think we see a lot of parallels. I do not have any insider information at all. I had close friends who were inside one of the major companies as of several years ago, before any of the current trouble started. So my opinions are all as a consumer looking at this now. And yes, it really does remind me of 83 in two ways. Number one, the market got overheated. You had people rushing in. There were no barriers to entry. Industries that have barriers to entry may be slower to blow up, but they also have guardrails against excesses and, frankly, against fraud. And so we see all this rushing in, all of the fans going mad. I mean, if you look at some of these events that some of the ESL championships and some of the Riot championships, you had absolutely devoted, faithful, crazed fans in, filling big arenas. And it all happened very, very fast. So fast forward now, again, the novelty wears off. I personally, as a consumer, I believe that there is a plateau there. I think there's an ongoing business, but we got so superheated that that all that perspective was lost. Another parallel problem that is not talked about but is very real is that in game development, we started to see people going, oh, I'm developing this game for esports. And in my role as a strategic advisor, I said to people, having your game in esports, used in esports, is not something you plan. It is something you earn by two things. By number one, building a game in a genre that is used for esports. And number two, building a great game. And number three, building a game that sells millions of copies. We cannot have fans in esports unless people understand and know the game, so they have a basis on which to evaluate and cheer for the athletes as they compete. So a lot of money was wasted by investors investing in game developers trying to do that, when that's not the way it works. You build the great game that does all those other things, which is already highly profitable. If it's the right kind of game, esports become an option. I'm an advisor to a MOBA company. That's what I've said to them, and they're ignoring esports. I know that secretly they're going, we're a MOBA. It could be true. But what they're out to do is build a great game. So I think that parallel is there. But what else is there that makes me think that there's an ongoing plateau? These fans who love the games really do love them. For some of those fans, it's something they may have been willing to go to once. But for some of those fans, they are going to continue to go. We have to figure out what that percentage is. We have to see which events survive, as the stronger ones survive and do not. We'll have to see which base games retain that audience, draw the best players. Another issue is that, and I'm going down in the weeds here, but there's also the issue of what it's like for the athletes. Because first of all, a lot of athletes who were part of these teams, the teams are no longer there. The teams have been reduced. And also, because it is a business like baseball, football, basketball, many of the athletes have very short professional careers before they lose their spots to other people. And having worked inside, especially baseball, but also football and car racing, that is just understood in these professional sports. There are all these great people coming up, all of whom want your spot. And you have to be as good as you can be to last long enough to have a full career and hopefully be able to keep the financial rewards from that. That whole system is now disrupted by the disruptions in revenue in esports. I think it will resettle, but when it does resettle, it will be very different. I think the one thing that will be the same is that it will remain extremely competitive to be a professional athlete.
Yeah, I believe that the average esports athlete ages out at like 23, 24, have to retire. So exactly what you're saying.
That's what I've read. So
yeah, and let me read some of these comments. We had some great comments coming in. So and again, don't know the name. So one person said, AI isn't a microwave code. It's never perfect. And since AI learns by our behavior, it can't accurately learn a perfect process. That's very true. Magic happens by accident 90% of the time. Scarcity and custom-made experience always have a greater impact than the mass manufactured ones. But consumerism mixed with corporate franchise systems often break themselves. Oh, that's true.
These are a series of very intelligent comments, by the way. They're very accurate.
Yeah. So somebody said,
right? This isn't YouTube.
So someone said, why not pair this use or retention XD? Didn't know what that means, but okay. Let's see. Create hype, don't follow it. Invest smarter. I like that. There's also a limit to how many real companies versus fly-by-night companies there are. So think about the .com bubble era that you're saying. A lot of fly-by-night companies that didn't make it. I can tell you that all these mass layoffs are public companies and private companies not knowing how to actually do what they do and blaming years of bad investment and poor budgets against failed products. Roblox, my daughter loves Roblox. Roblox is still not profitable as a company, even though they got mass investment. I actually own Roblox, so yeah, I'm one of those people, I guess, believing into the hype. IP is always king, dead on Don. I think there is another curve. It isn't about being a great game. It's about being understand what the heck is going on the screen and non-gamers and people with the money to hype it up. Very, very true. And then Adam Starcaster, I mean it, isn't only okay. Anyone from Jacksonville, Florida, Baltimore, Maryland, Dallas, Texas, or any other major city of minorities will tell you the best esports games are the ones on TV. Okay.
You said
Constant
not the
rules.
ones on TV.
Huh?
Not the
Oh,
ones.
no, not the ones on TV. Of course, yeah. Inconsistent rules equals game show. The last one from Chris, who thought Don was going to win, and rock, scissors, paper, not me, but I'll hold that against him. For an industry that will be worth over $24 billion by 2024, do you think we will see the esports wagering space become more familiar in the narrative for places like brick and mortar casinos, or is this more conducive for platforms like Twitch? Don, that question is for you.
It's interesting. I think this is another case where we have another, I don't know if you call it a bubble, but we have another wave because legalized betting has opened the doors to this so much. The professional sports leagues ran like crazy away from anything having to do with gambling for years. Pete Rose bet on his own team, banned from baseball for life. Shoeless Joe Jackson played great in the 1919 World Series, was illiterate and was alleged to have known about the plot, and so he was banned from baseball for life for having anything to do that might have with saying that was gambling. Now the leagues have started in just the last 2 years, have started to it was disguised as fantasy sports, which is its own legitimate business that unfortunately they got intertwined. But in the last 2 years, they've been really worked at integrating it. If I look, for example, at any of the major sports sites that publish sports data, what's the first thing you see? You see sponsors, an issue I know we'll discuss with esports. We see sponsors for daily wagering, and they are apparently paying a lot of the bills. And this is for major sports. So with all that momentum, now here's esports. Well, it's inevitable, in my view, that those two are going to combine. But because esports is a new business in which the industry is still sorting itself out, I think, again, it's just like the question about AI. For those people who are committed to esports in the long term, how do you recognize this as a major new source of revenue? That money is there right now. It has been legitimized by the major physical sports, so it is not the stigma it once was. In a down market, finding new investors and new money and new sponsors is a great opportunity. How do you do it without having the tail of betting wagging the dog of the events? That's the challenge that baseball, football, basketball, esports all face. Because if we reach the point where the betting on it, this is part of what's dogging the NCAA right now. If the betting becomes the center of the activity, it ceases to be about the athletes. It becomes about the betting. Once it's all about the betting, a lot of bad things we know from history start to happen. So on the one hand, I look at and say, this is very good timing for esports. And on the other, I hope we tread carefully. And my respectfully submitted advice to esports leaders is watch everything that's going on with the established sports, team sports now. Look for every mistake they make so you don't have to make it because they made it for you.
Yeah, that's interesting. We probably saw the news a few weeks ago. ESPN and Penn Gaming, signed a $500 million deal that can escalate up the next 10 years to $1.5 billion. So even like the worldwide leader of sports, ESPN is now trying to get into the gambling aspect to kind of build in that revenue. So you're definitely correct. It'll be interesting to see. And then of course it's trickle down, right? Because from a company standpoint, if they can make the revenue, they're going to try to find it. So if that next revenue space is esports, then it'll be interesting to see how that trickles down.
Because they need growth also. These are public companies. So I'm sorry, I interrupt you. Please go ahead.
No problem. We were talking about Roblox earlier, and I don't know if you had seen this in the last couple of weeks, but there's been a slew of reports about gambling for youth, right, happening in the ecosystem because there's just not those guardrails in place. Yeah. So we already have that problem there. You've got the other platform, Kick, which is a streaming platform, potential competitor to Twitch, which is, I think, owned or largely sponsored by a gambling company, right? So we have to get our guardrails up, like you said, in esports, because it's going to create just this kind of cesspool, right? It only goes down from there. And especially when we talk about traditional sports, at least you're talking about adults. This space is predominantly geared towards and for children and youth.
Yeah. And I think the ideal strategy, I think in 5 or 6 years, the day wagering and all that kind of gambling elements will sort themselves out. The bad actors will be identified and will fall away. Best practices will emerge. So I think all we need to do is get a time machine, go forward 5 years to see how that happens, and we'd be okay. But unfortunately, we haven't figured out that time machine yet. If I'd had one in 1971, I really would have done well.
So then it's the R word. So what about regulation? So how much regulation from a gaming standpoint in esports like you think is needed? Like, you have some people that love regulation. They think regulation will take out the bad seeds in every apple.
Mm-hmm.
You have people that's anti-regulation, just kind of have the wild west and the cream rises per se. So what do you think about regulation from a gaming standpoint in esports?
I don't think I know that part of the games industry well enough to give an intelligent answer to that.
Okay.
The one thing I would say is every major entertainment industry we have, when it became apparent that the government was ready to regulate them, desperately rushed into Congress and said, we'll regulate ourselves. It's okay. We'll do it for you. So I expect that moment to happen as well.
It just happened to crypto, right?
Yes.
Perhaps a little too late, but
and then you saw the ruling. The SEC basically got struck down by the higher court. So it's going to be a lot of institutions. Talk about institutions. A lot of institutions now having their own Bitcoin ETFs, their own Bitcoin mutual funds to kind of take away the whole decentralization of Bitcoin as they put institutional money in, to then have their own Bitcoin funds on the stock market. So now instead of buying Bitcoin and having that decentralized, now you have to go through an institution to buy Bitcoin to have it quote unquote safer. So yeah, definitely right there.
I think there's several more chapters to be written in that legal and litigation book.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I agree. Anytime
we lost Mario there.
Have a keen way of. So,
it's the hurricane. It's out to get him.
That's what it is. The internet's catching up from 3 days ago.
Yeah. The hurricane got me finally, I guess.
Go ahead, Mario.
No, I was just saying, anytime big business gets in the way or puts their hands on something, and it definitely they find a way to get what they want. So, to your point, it's going to be a lot more chapters in the book of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin before it's written.
Don, do you still play video games today?
I do. I tend to play what's either my own or clients' games in development, or what's competitive with those games. So I'm not, I've got a stack of things I want to play that I don't get to. So I don't run from the latest hit game to the latest hit game, because most of what I do these days is focused on research. And then if there's something that one of my kids or one of my grandkids wants to play, well, then that's different.
Have you heard in the esports space, there's a stigma of ageism against adult gamers, older gamers, that esports is not for adults. It's basically designed for this, at least this is the stigma. The stereotype is 13 to 21 or 22, 23, 24. What are your thoughts about that stigma? And in your peer group, what percentage of your peers are playing video games actively and might want to play competitively?
I don't. Of course, my peer group is people who probably average 30, 35 years of working in the industry. So I'm probably a bad example. Mm-hmm. But I think I actually look back at that, and if you go back 40 years in video games, it was assumed that was mostly a kids thing, and then adults would play with the kids sometimes. We knew that we were selling to adults, and a lot of adults were playing. But that was the image and the idea of gamers. Well, gamers were first, it used to be teens and under. And then a little bit of time went by, and the people who started being gamers as teens and tweens got older. Now gamers are 20-somethings and teens. Another 10 years pass. Oh, 37 is the real age. More years. There was a dividing line, just like in society in the late 60s. There were dividing lines that came in, and some people were more focused on what was new, and some people were more focused on they liked what was there before and they wanted to retain it. The same thing happens in games, but one of the advantages of being older that I can see is I've watched this cycle go. So assuming that esports has one of the great long-term arguments one could make for the viability of esports is that the longer we have esports, as the initial fans get older, the greater the breadth of age demographic of those who will be interested as fans who might dream of playing someday. There are older groups and teams that are competing, and that will only get better in time. I may not be around 40 or 50 years from now to see that prediction come true, but it has been true all the way through tech. People who were happy with the way they were using things before a new technology comes in very often stick with that older technology, understandably so. It works for them, they're used to it, and they may be hesitant to pick up new tech. Kids, one of the things when I teach interface design, visiting universities and stuff, one of the things I'll always say is the people who are now entering school at the college level grew up with touchscreens in many cases. For them, the whole idea of interface is not an interface you learn, is an interface that is an extension of your fingers and how you interact with the screen. You don't even think about it. You don't think of it as an interface. It's just the way the world is. How do you close and open the front door of your house? We don't think of that. Well, there's technology, or there's hinges, and there's a lock and a latch. And we don't think about that. It's just you open and close the door. Touchscreen for young people is just like that. They don't have to think about it and understand it. It's just intuitive to them.
Yeah.
My 4-year-old granddaughter, completely intuitive to her at age 4. So we get these dividing lines. As each of the people who grew up after these dividing lines get older, those things cease to be remarkable and they become routine, which means those people can intuitively do a lot of things their elders cannot. But it also means that when the next change happens, they then fall back and have to decide to go forward with the next new thing to learn it or not learn it. And so we saw it with touchscreens, we saw it with mobile phones, we saw it just using personal computers. Some people went ahead and tried it and others did not. But the young people who grow up with it as an assumed part of life, they will stay with it and they will drive things forward.
You know, that's funny. I was trying to find something yesterday on my daughter's not on her iPad. And I was like, hey, find this for me. She found it like that. And I was like, oh, I'm getting old. And so to your point, and I love the conversations in the LinkedIn chat, man. And it's great because like from a gaming standpoint, you have gamers like from like so many different thought processes. We have people talking about, you know, betting, monetizing, not monetizing, you know, why gaming is community. I'm probably like on a more monetization standpoint. We can have fun, but then also kind of make money at the same time. And my capitalist, who knows? But it's just great. So definitely everybody in the comments, we love the comments. We love the engagement. Everyone is a living a first person narrative. Sports helps people grow. It gives them self-esteem. How does money affect that? That's true, right? Money doesn't affect the self-esteem. Definitely true, but you know, definitely money makes the world go round. So definitely, there's a way that we can all monetize and be happy game at the same time. We're all happy. So I guess next time I need some help on an iPad or a phone, I gotta ask my 9-year-old daughter. So you've been in gaming for a very, very long time. So 5 years, 10 years from now, where do you see gaming?
You know, I think that we're now in a position where we've always said, oh, video gaming, it's just, you know, and we've always had just one sense of one business. Well, that's not really true anymore. Mobile is already its own business. Designing for mobile is fundamentally different than designing for a console, which increasingly is fundamentally different than designing for PC as an online experience. Online now crosses all of those platforms. So it's not a question of connected or not, it's connected, it's a matter of connected right now or not, because we're all connected. And so all these things open new opportunities as these businesses grow, because the biggest difference you really look at is connected or not, solo, team, PvE, PvP, the looking at all those factors and the size of the screen, the resolution of the screen, and can you take it with you or does it stay stuck in the house? Those are the ways we can start to break things down. Mobile marches to its own drummer. We have different business models. We monetize differently. We have to advertise differently. We retain differently. As you guys know, we market differently.
Right.
We look at different KPIs, key performance indicators, to evaluate how well we're doing than we would when we're on console. Console, we've already been migrating from looking at through retail now to looking at through digital distribution. And so some of those factors apply, but it's a completely different kind of experience. How do we look at length of play session? What interface? Complexity, ease of use, tutorial, quick onboarding. How much time do you have to get the player on to like the game before they discard it and move on to something else? There are mobile categories where you have 20 seconds. We all argue about that. No, you got 45 seconds. You got 20 seconds. Let's face it, you don't have much time. It doesn't matter if it's 20 seconds or 40 seconds. But in certain online marketplaces, it isn't much more than that you get. And increasingly, preview mechanisms, which have always been so important in media, are becoming more and more of a deal. Influencers, looking at trailers and so on and so forth. It used to be our preview mechanism was magazines. And we always said, oh, dude, like radio, like, you know, they're a preview mechanism for music. And like, dude, they get to preview stuff we can't. That's not good. We got to have a preview mechanism because we're previewing in magazines. That sucks. Well, we wanted something to change and it's changed.
Yeah.
So all these factors. So I think to come back to your question, 5 or 10 years, what we're looking at is something that one time was kind of a unified industry. And there are all these different strands growing off, each strand of which is a multi-billion-dollar business. In the case of mobile, you know, over 100 billion just by itself, and then having subcategories within that. And I think that increasingly, what does this remind us of? It reminds us of cinema. It reminds us of television. It reminds us of the record business. A lot of people don't know that when Electronic Arts was founded, that was the first case of producers being in the video games industry. And I was one of that first handful of producers at EA. And the two of the first investors in Electronic Arts when it was just starting, when Trip Hawkins was raising money. Obviously, he had Don Valentine at Sequoia as the lead investor. And the company actually started in Sequoia's offices before we went into our first office. And I didn't come until we already had an outside office before I came. But the two of those first investors were Jerry Moss and Herb Alpert of A&M Records, which at that time was one of the biggest labels. And Jerry Moss, unfortunately, just passed away. And Trip talked to them, and one of the influences he had, Trip already had great understanding of this material, but he decided to create the title of producer in video games, which no other company had used before. And then producers from A&M Records were brought in to EA to teach us as producers what that meant. And I only got in on the latter part of that, and I used that training every week in my career still over 40 years later.
Wow.
And people say, oh, what could the record producers teach you about being in video games? And if I give you one, I was talking about this with a friend earlier today. If I give you one great example, they said, very matter-of-factly, very calmly, and very confidently, and the room was absolutely silent listening to him. And you started to think about it and you realized just how important it was what you just heard. They said, all hits are flukes. The only way to predict hits is to copycat other people.
Yeah.
The only way to produce hits is to find talent. You find talent, you have producers who hone, challenge, push, question, encourage, nurture that talent. And if the talent is commercially viable, if they can earn money, both the talent and the company will prosper. And eventually you will be able to predict hits, because only talent allows you to do that without just being a copycat. That lesson has stayed with me forever. When EA was a tiny company before we went public, before any of that happened, if we started talking as producers about ideas, somebody would say, well, I mean, these are ideas, these are categories we want to be in, but we have to remember, we're not trying to build hits, we're trying to find talent, and the talent will build the hits. That was how idealistic the company was in those early days, and how driven it was by that principle, which came from the music business.
That's cool. So as we wrap up, so first off, everybody in the chat, amazing, great conversations. Y'all can definitely tune in. Keep that same energy. Now, next time in the chat, though, y'all vote for me when it comes to rock, scissors, paper, right? Not an Emmy Award winning. You vote for a person who has their own ETF on the stock market. But the reason why I asked about the next 5 or 10 years is because, of course, a lot of games went off of chips, right? We heard about NVIDIA, but it's also a chip company out there that a lot of people don't talk about that might be a good investment for the future, and that is Taiwan Semiconductor, TSM. Now, we got some geopolitical stuff going on, so who knows what's going to happen with our partnership or non-partnership with China and Taiwan. But over the past 10 years, definitely Taiwan Semiconductor went up to almost 1,300%. pretty big spike. And then, of course, it went down. But the interesting thing is that it's picking back up. So it went down by almost 60% when the market went down in 2022. But as I said, it's picking back up. From its bottom to now, it's up almost 100%. And it has to actually go up another 50% to get back to where it was. And that's just short term. Long term, as more people game, as more people bet on games per the chat, right? And more people game, you have the big money institutions that's gaming as well from an esports standpoint. TSM might be an investment that you want to look at. Of course, NVIDIA is out there as well. But NVIDIA has popped up so much from an investment standpoint, you might be buying it high. So if you want a semiconductor company that makes chips that's involved in gaming, you might want to look into TSM. And I'm done. My stock.
I'm ready for next time.
Yeah. Are you ready? Okay.
But before we go, Don, first, thank you for your time, and thank you everybody for tuning in and just amazing conversations in the chat. Don, can you just share a brief description of what AIAS is and what the foundation does?
It's the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, and the foundation is the charitable wing. We provide scholarships, mentoring, and educational opportunities for individuals who are early in their game careers or studying in universities for game careers, planning game careers. And we have a special focus on mentoring and supporting underrepresented groups to increase the diversity and equity within the games industry. So if you look at interactive.org, that's the AIS website overall. And that's very much like the Television Academy or the Recording Academy. And then if you look on the website, you'll see a button at the top for the foundation. You can click on that. And there you'll be able to learn about our scholarships, our mentoring programs, and see those opportunities. And if the folks who have been watching this, if there's anyone they know who's planning a career in games, is an early career in games, and is doing a great job and is a promising member of our community, from whatever background, please let them know about our scholarships so they will apply. Each year, the pool grows larger, but often we're able to increase the number of scholarships as well. And the track record of our scholars in the industry is tremendous. And we just want to put more students like that and keep the flywheel moving as we build to a truly diverse industry.
You can be sure that we will clip this section for sure out of this amazing conversation we had for the last hour and get this, shared with our network and our community so we can get more people to interactive.org. If you didn't hear earlier, interactive.org to learn more about AIAS and the foundation. Thanks again so much for your time. We had to bring you back for a second conversation because we didn't talk about any of the books you've written. I'm sure so many other stories about the gaming industry. We're all fellow authors here. So we appreciate all the knowledge and the history lesson. I learned a lot tonight about the gaming industry I didn't know. And so thank you for your wisdom and your time.
Hey, thank you guys so much for having me. I had a great time and I'm really thrilled to be here with you.
Excellent. Anybody else, if you want to connect with Don, he's on LinkedIn, Don Daglow. And we appreciate you spending time with us this evening as well. We will see you again, same bat channel, maybe a slightly different day and bat time, but we'll see you next week so we can help you level up your wealth. Before we go, Mario, how can everybody find you and connect with you besides the bit.ly level up your wealth?
Yeah. Y'all can click the link, or you can follow me on my Instagram, all social medias. Painful Profits, PAYNEFUL Profits, because we make money. It's painful sometimes. We make money. And again, the chat, man, you guys were lit today. So please bring that same energy next week. We actually have a person who created a game, so we can actually talk about, should they be doing some online betting on that game to make some money or not? So we can definitely continue the conversation. But everybody in the chat, we love it. Again, just Painful Profits or relaxinvestor.com. Either or, you can find me.
Okay, and then Elle, thank you for you had some of the best comments tonight. So you also win a digital copy of my book and Mario's book. So we had 2 winners tonight. We're going to start having multiple winners every week. Again, definitely engage and get your bets in at the beginning of the show, and then be engaged in the conversation like you all are tonight. Excellent job tonight. Lots of opportunity for everyone. So thanks for your time. We'll see you next week. Peace.